Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the regular meeting of the Multnomah County Board of Commissioners. Vice Chair Jones Dixon and Commissioner Megan Moyer are in attendance virtually this morning. Audience members, I want to start by asking you to please silence your electronic devices. I would also like to remind you that in addition to the audience in this room, we have people watching and listening online, so please consider your language in comments and testimony today. Today's meeting is a hybrid board meeting. Some presenters and guests will appear in person and some will appear virtually. For those presenting virtually, please mute your mic when not speaking, and when presenting, make sure to unmute your mic and turn on your camera. For those joining us in person to provide public testimony or to present, please turn your mic on when you begin speaking so the green light is showing, and off when you've completed your remarks so the red light is showing. And for all presenters, please state your name for the record before speaking or responding to questions. May I have a motion on the consent calendar?
So moved. Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 All right, the consent calendar is approved. We're ready for public testimony.
Opportunity for public comment on non-agenda matters. This is a time for the board to hear public testimony, not for board deliberation. When it is your turn to speak, I will call your name and unmute you or call you to the presenter's table. I will set a timer for 3 minutes when you begin speaking and announce when your time is up, at which point please wrap up your sentence. We have 6 people signed up for verbal testimony and received 5 written testimonies which were shared with board members and staff. We'll start with Anjanette Brown, Candace Jimenez, Amy Griffin, and Sarah Chedister.
Good morning. Thank you guys for being here. Whoever is ready can just go ahead and get started. You can go ahead. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, folks. Hello, members of City Council Homelessness and Housing Committee. My name is Sarah Chedister. I am a PSU student and community advocate. I'm here today to request that the $106 million of unused housing funds be used to expand affordable housing and strengthen a housing-first approach to addressing homelessness. Portland is facing a housing crisis that impacts working families, seniors, students, and people with disabilities. Rents have increased faster than wages, and more people are being pushed into homelessness not because they failed, but because the system failed them. When someone loses housing, it becomes exponentially harder to regain stability, especially in a shelter system that doesn't prioritize housing first. Mayor Wilson has continued Mayor Wheeler's plan to fund shelter expansion and end homelessness. However, the 2024 Finding Home Report found that people experiencing homelessness do not want shelter expansion and would move into a house if it was easier and they had the resources and support to maintain their house so they can integrate back into society successfully. Using the available funds to put people into permanent housing and preventing the loss of houses in the first place serves as a long-term solution to end homelessness. Housing first efforts practiced by shelters such as Ant Farm show success in housing people first and then providing them with resources. It also provides people with the autonomous choice of when and where to start integrating back into society and to be able to maintain their homes with support from a peer team when challenges arise. Housing First is a model that prioritizes permanent housing as the starting point for stability. It does not require people to prove they are ready for housing. It recognizes that housing is what makes stability possible. I'm advocating for the $106 million to be allocated towards Housing First initiatives and prevention of homelessness for individuals and families at risk. I'm asking that you focus on long-term goals for the housing and homelessness crisis. Please prioritize permanent, supportive housing and ensure these resources go directly towards keeping people housed. Invest in solutions that are proven, compassionate, and effective. Thank you for your time and commitment to our community.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Amy Griffin, and I'm speaking today on my own time, and my words do not represent my role as an employee. Chair, in your letter to directors this last November, you wrote, in part, the goal of eliminating disparities and prioritizing services to folks adversely affected by racism and other socioeconomic conditions must remain a core focus. This is not only the right thing to do, but it will make the biggest impact and achieve the best outcomes for everyone we serve. Budget proposals must be centered on the goal of maximizing direct services to our residents, end quote. And I absolutely agree with you and ask that you honor those words by restoring 100% of the proposed cuts to direct clinical services. These proposed cuts are devastating and confusing. They eliminate 3 entire DCS programs that provide vital mental health services to our community. One cut is not a budget cut issue, with Preschool for All sitting on a $600 million surplus and still eliminating our services. These cuts to DCS, as proposed by the Health Department Director, will eliminate 14 KSA positions, 11 who hold BIPOC identities, 5 additional BIPOC staff without KSAs, at least 2 LGBTQIA staff, and 100% of our BIPOC supervisors. And last but not least, it will affect a reduction in hours to 4 additional BIPOC staff. These cuts come at a time when our federal government has made daily life increasingly hostile for Black and Brown communities. Taking away critical mental health support at this time is unconscionable. So I need to ask you directly, how is eliminating entire culturally and linguistically responsive care consistent with your commitment to equity as you laid out for the directors when they were proposing these cuts? Cutting any DCS staff means thousands, if not more, children will lose essential mental health care when and where they need it most. And what that looks like in real life is a teenager with suicidal ideation goes unnoticed, a toddler showing signs of sexual abuse slips through the cracks and suffers more unimaginable trauma. And every time services are cut, Black and Brown children suffer the absolute most. More will be mislabeled and pushed out of school, and more families will fall through the safety net meant to protect them. Now is the time we should be expanding mental health support for children, not dismantling it. These crushing proposed cuts will undoubtedly create more crisis later, and that crisis always costs far more than prevention ever will. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. You can go ahead.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Candace Jimenez. I'm a Multnomah County resident, a tribal citizen of the Confederated Tribes of Warm Springs, and a public health professional who has spent much of my career working in partnership with tribal and community health systems across our region. I'm here today because the proposed elimination of the Gun Violence Behavioral Health Response Team would remove one of the few trauma-informed supports available to youth and families affected by gun violence in our region, reducing direct clinical services. When gun violence happens, the trauma doesn't end with the incident itself. Young people, siblings, families, and entire neighborhoods carry that impact long afterward. Nationally, nearly 3 million children are exposed to gun violence every year, and firearms are now the leading cause of death for youth in America. Recognizing these impacts, Multnomah County launched the Gun Violence Behavioral Health Response Team in 2022 as a pilot effort to support youth and families affected by gun violence. The team connects young people and families with culturally responsive, trauma-informed counseling services, often meeting youth directly in their homes or schools or wherever they're most comfortable. This work also addresses the broader social conditions that shape health, including housing instability, school disruption, and family stress that often follow community violence. It's also one of the only fully BIPOC clinically licensed behavioral health teams in the county, bringing culturally grounded care to communities who often face barriers to accessing traditional health systems. To my understanding, this is also one of the only programs of its kind serving youth and families affected by gun violence in our region. Programs like this don't just respond to violence, they reduce the long-term cost of trauma across schools, health systems, and families, where healing after harm is understood as a necessary part of restoring safety and well-being within families and communities. Multnomah County's own violence prevention framework also identifies trauma-informed behavioral health support for youth and families impacted by gun violence as a part of its key prevention strategies. And when we remove pieces of that prevention system, it becomes harder for the overall strategy to succeed. I understand that this budget cycle requires difficult decisions, and when we look at what truly supports long-term community safety and healing, programs that respond to trauma after violence occurs are foundational. Violence prevention doesn't end when the violence happens. It begins with how we help families heal afterwards. Healing families is violence prevention. Decisions about prevention programs like this shape the kind of safety and healing we're creating for the next generation of youth and families in our community. Behind this program are young people and families working to heal after violence, and I respectfully urge the county to reconsider eliminating the gun violence behavioral health response team in the FY27 budget. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning, Council. Good morning, Commissioners. Good morning, Chair. My name is Anjanette Brown, and I'm a member and a parent of this community. I'm here today to support investment in this community support program, Us First. Organizations like this do much more than just provide food. They connect families to critical resources that help people stay stable during difficult times. Community support programs help families access food, basic necessities, guidance, and local resources that keep people from falling into deeper crisis. When we invest in these programs, we strengthen the entire community. These services support working families, children, seniors, and neighbors who may just need temporary support to get back on their feet. Programs like Us First help prevent bigger problems before they start. I'm here today with my 5-year-old daughter, and because the decisions made in this room like this shape the community she will grow up in, I respectfully ask Council to continue supporting programs that help families stay healthy, stable, and connected to the resources that they need. Please uplift Us First, community support program to help families stay stable before small struggles become big crises. Thank you for your time, and thank you for serving our communities.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have Lightning and Injured and Pissed Off.
Yes, my name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Pegasus Griffin Lab. One of the things I want to stress is that we have two people sitting up here wanting to run for chair. And in my opinion, if you mess up on the Lightning body-worn camera program and you don't have adequate funding for that, which is supposed to happen in the spring, neither one of you will be elected. That's my prediction. And I'm pretty good at predictions. And the reality is that funding mechanism is the most important issue right now. And you can utilize the supported housing services measure, which has already been put into place and the money is there, just to do a request and say that the reason is these body-worn cameras will also help keep more homeless people out of the jails, inside the jails. And that's a very important thing to have in place for the homeless community is these body-worn cameras to where when they file complaints, we can analyze the video and audio. The reality is that it's very simple for Multnomah County. Motorola is going to be the body-worn camera vendor, and all you have to do is talk to them and say, how many body-worn cameras can you put on all of the Multnomah County Sheriff's Department? And they will analyze that. They will give you the specific number, where they go, and then they will provide you with the plan. As far as on the body-worn camera policy, that's going to be boilerplate. That's all that the Sheriff's Department is going to do, very simplistic. But we have to have the right to come back, the commissioners and the chair, and make changes on that body-worn camera policy by a vote. And again, I want to have the auditors have full access to any and all data, video, and audio. And I want to make sure that they have access. Again, I will be implementing external mechanisms to analyze all the video and audio through civil rights attorneys, and also I'll be working with the Lewis and Clark College and their professors on this issue, and also helping them fund their program over there. So again, if either one of you want to get elected as chair, if this does not move forward because of funding, I will make sure that neither one of you become the next chair. And I can guarantee you that. And I can tell you right now, there's politicians at the city of Portland that when I say that to them, they understand I mean what I say. And again, through all legal means, you will not get reelected. And the reality is, it's the most important issue. It's the first time we've ever had them on the Multnomah County Sheriff's Department in history. And again, you will solidify my legacy in history when you do that, because I am the most outspoken person in Multnomah County in history on this issue. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good luck.
And our next speaker is not here, so I'd like to call up Charles Bridge-Green Johnson.
Good morning.
Well, buenos dias, candidates and the other three of y'all, Madam Chair. So I guess my sabbatical has wrapped up. I thought about coming back yesterday to join you. I hope at the end of the whole shindig here, we'll get to hear a little bit of highlights from yesterday. But I'm not really offended when people say some parts of my life look like a little bit of an incompetent clown show. And yesterday, that included going to City Hall for to be part of the incompetent clown show. And you should, I don't think in the entire time so far as chair, Ms. Peterson, you've had a spicy session like they had yesterday, spicy and shade, and really unfortunate because while so far the news here in the county is mostly good, and nobody has turned up unspent $9 million or $20 million or $109 million on a critical issue like housing. We know that there's still a lot of work to be done. And just recently in the city, one thing we don't talk about is the disproportionate risk of premature death among the housing population. So we know people are actually dying of more natural causes, even in the shelters run by the county. But in the city, with its partnership with Urban Alchemy, we lost somebody to a tragic fire. And I hope that the city and the county regulatory authorities will be talking about getting into all the facilities and making sure that safety inspections. The county doesn't directly run any pods anymore. The last time we had huts, shelters, tiny houses was when we were subcontracting Do Good over next to the former bus station. So I don't know the level of experience, but I really think that it's a time when the health department hopefully still has resources to go and look at these facilities, do smoke detector inspections and stuff like that, and possibly also offer a pathway, even though the city should be doing it, but some of these people are going to need trauma-related care. They may not be able to maintain housing in this. Housing is a bit of an overdramatic word for the Urban Alchemy pods, but they may need relocation. So I hope that there's some resources and resilience for that. In the bigger picture across the state, in the spicy, saucy thing, I noticed that intersects with your agenda for tomorrow. I think we'll have a tour from Portland Public Schools coming by, and maybe a good number of you will be here. And interestingly enough, the Oregon Education Association doesn't want to endorse Ms. Kotek yet. So anyway, I hope we get some traction on public education to move those scores up, and that you'll be able to partner well with the public schools and the State Department of Education to do better for our students. Thank you.
Thanks, Charles. It's good to see you.
That's all for public testimony. We will now move to R1. R1, Elections Division Audit Report Presentation.
All right, thank you so much, Emily. So now I'm glad to welcome the auditor and her team to talk about the Elections Division Audit Report presentation. So Auditor McGurk, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. For the record, I'm Jennifer McGurk. I'm the Multnomah County Auditor, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm pleased to be with you this morning with Suneva Bennett, Danny Bernstein, and Mandy Hood to talk about the results of our performance audit of the Elections Division. And without further ado, I will turn it over to the team.
Good morning.
Thank you, Auditor McGurk. Good morning. For the record, my name is Mandy Hood. I am a Senior Performance Auditor with the Multnomah County Auditor's Office. My pronouns are she and they. First, next slide, please. Thank you. So first, I just wanted to provide an overview of what we'll be discussing in our presentation today. We're going to provide a brief background on the division, and then we will discuss the audit we conducted, including our objectives, why we did the audit, what we did, and what we found and recommend. Next slide, please. We'd like to start by providing some acknowledgements. During our audit, we observed the high level of commitment, dedication, and pride that the division's employees brought to their work, and we're grateful for all that they do to support the right to vote and to uphold the integrity of our democracy. Next slide. So a little bit of background about the Elections Division. The division administers elections for 6 cities and 26 special districts in Multnomah County. They do this for 578,000 registered voters. That's as of November 2025. And in fiscal year 2025, the division had a total budget of $8,489,212, which included funds for implementing ranked choice voting and administering the 2024 presidential election. And with that, I will pass, next slide, please. I wrote the wrong thing on there. So now we'll talk a little bit about the audit. Next slide. So we had 4 audit objectives. They were to determine the extent to which the Elections Division has remedied recent ballot errors and taken steps to prevent similar errors in the future. We also wanted to describe the division's implementation of ranked choice voting for the City of Portland candidate elections and assess impacts of those efforts on voter participation, particularly for historically underserved communities, and identify improvements for the 2026 county candidate race for ranked choice voting. We wanted to assess the Election Division's current facility and its impacts on the division's ability to administer safe, secure, and accessible elections. And we wanted to assess any structural staffing challenges that could contribute to inequities and impact the division's ability to achieve its mission and vision. Next slide. So I had some reasons for doing this audit. The first is that the Elections Division had not been audited by us in about 15 years, so we thought it was time to come in and take a look. Also, the division, as I said, recently implemented its ranked choice voting elections for the City of Portland's 2024 candidate elections, and will do so next year, or this year rather, for county candidate races. And in addition, there were ballot errors in at least 2 recent elections in 2024, which the division corrected, but we wanted to take a look to see if they've reduced the risk of those errors happening in the future. Next slide, please. So here's what we did. We researched best practices and reviewed Elections Division documentation. That included reviewing best practices on elections administration, ranked choice voting, and voter education and outreach. We also reviewed documents provided by the Elections Division related to staffing and operations, including budget, elections procedures, and strategic assessment. We also reviewed the last 3 countywide employee surveys and its analysis, and we reviewed recommendations about the 2024 ballot errors. Next slide, please. We conducted 46 interviews, including permanent and limited duration employees. We also interviewed on-call workers, Multnomah County's GIS and IT security staff, subject matter experts on ranked choice voting, elections officers in similar jurisdictions, City of Portland elections staff. In addition, we conducted 2 surveys that included a survey of current and former staff, including on-call workers, and a survey of community-based organizations on working with the county on voter education and ranked choice voting. And though it's not listed on these slides, we also conducted observations of elections offices in the weeks prior to the November 2024 election and on election night. We observed on-call worker trainings and we toured elections facilities. Next slide, please. And with that, I will pass it to Neva.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Suneva Bennett. For the record, I am a management auditor with the Auditor's Office, and I will start us off on our findings. Next slide, please. Multnomah County successfully implemented ranked choice voting. Yay. Next slide. The Elections Division's workload increased with ranked choice voting. Some of the things that staff did was update and create new ballot instructions specific to ranked choice. They also created a voters pamphlet, and important to note, the voters pamphlet is where most voters learn about the election. They updated, and by update, really, they created a lot of new systems, including voting system software, also specific tabulation related to ranked choice, and also results reporting. And they also practiced a multi-winner ranked choice election hand recount that they believe was the first in the nation in July 2024. So that was really important. Next slide, please. And despite the increased workload and a similar number of staff as to past elections, the division certified the election, including ranked choice and, of course, all the non-ranked choice contests on December 2nd, the certification deadline. Next slide, please. So voter participation, we looked at undervotes to get a sense of voter behavior and participation. There was some reports in the media that voter participation was lower, but the rates of undervotes or voters choosing to not vote in a specific race were similar to past City of Portland mayoral and council races. So for reference, the overall undervote rate for the Portland City Council for 2024 was, across all districts, 15.37%, as compared to the city commissioner races in 2020 was 12.5%, and 2016 was 22.2%. So this would suggest that voters adapted well in 2024. And undervotes are fairly common in a general election. Voters will vote at the top of the ballot and then drop off as they go down the ballot. All right, next slide. We also looked at overvotes to understand disparities, and the Elections Division in their report stated that overvotes were of the greatest concern as they make it impossible to count a person's vote for the candidates who are selected as a part of an overvote. So in this example, you can see folks overvoted for their first choice, and those votes wouldn't count, but the next rankings would be moved over to the positions to fill in. So next slide, please. So here we have sharing a visual of the City of Portland's District 1, the most eastern district bordering Gresham, had the highest percentage of overvotes for their first choice ranking. So that means that who folks wanted to rank in the number as their first choice, they were unable to count that. Okay, next slide, please. This is our next finding. The voter education and outreach program was a core service of the Elections Division before budget cuts. Next slide, thank you. The elimination of the voter education and outreach program limits relationship building and outreach opportunities within the county. Voter education and outreach staff worked out in the community to address barriers to voter participation through partnership building and targeted outreach. The division still has its East County location, so that's important, and it also has language materials translated into other languages than English. But those are things that people have to access, and there's a gap between how they learn about those resources, and that's something that the voter education and outreach staff filled. So just to quote the vision, the elimination of this program will impact access to underserved communities. This was something they shared in last year's budget cycle. Next slide, please. The voter education outreach program staff also created a vote map, and this is where they had precinct level data analysis, so looking at turnout rates in precincts and then understanding the demographics of those precincts to target their outreach. So some of their work included 35 culturally specific events in those neighborhoods showing lower voter outreach. They also had tours of the election building for school students, which was something that I think can be really impactful. They also had presentations from Multnomah County reference librarians, and some other unique projects that they had were Voters Without a Residence initiative, and they also did in-reach to voters in custody in Multnomah County facilities. Next slide, please. The current community efforts, the Ranked Choice Voting Grant is important, especially right now, but doesn't replace the role and work of a comprehensive voter education and outreach program, and should be rolled into a voter education and outreach program. Part of the work the education outreach program did was also informing people about voter assistance, including people with disabilities, and also those that speak other languages than English. In fiscal year 23 budget, the department division pointed out that the Help America Vote Act requires outreach programs to inform individuals with disabilities about availability to accessible voting options. But they have been able to coordinate with other jurisdictions and use on-call staff to continue to attend USCIS ceremonies and register new citizens. But there's still a need to address turnout and engagement. And we also understand that in this time of misinformation and confusion, it's important that partnerships and trust is built with government, being a presence in the community that can be relied on as a source of truth. And I'll just, next slide, please. We'll share a quote from a community partner. Government and politics can at times feel very unreachable by our underserved communities. Having MOLTCO elections at our events to table and educate is critical in my opinion. Our folks need to know their vote matters. It is a doorway to the political system for them. And so to that end, we can go to our recommendations. Thank you. This recommendation advocates for and requests the reinstatement of the voter education and outreach program, as it was a multi-pronged approach that created a program of voter inclusion. And our next slide. For context, this recommendation came about in part, as a position that was a part of the voter education program and funded a few times as one time only, was not renewed, but also not identified in the last budget. So that's the context for this recommendation, to direct all county departments to include in all departmental budgets reductions a description of and function of one-time only funds. And with that, I will pass it to Danny.
Thanks, Neva. For the record, I'm Danny Bernstein, Senior Auditor. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm going to go over our findings related to staffing. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. In the big picture, when we looked at staffing issues, we found that the Elections Division needs to better support its staff. This is obviously important for staff support, workforce equity, and retention, and especially because in elections, staffing issues can raise the risk of errors, and any mistake could potentially erode public trust in elections. Next slide. The division has a small permanent staff, 16 budgeted positions in fiscal year 2025, and these staff positions, most of them are in highly specialized roles. The division also relies heavily on a temporary workforce in order to administer elections, and in fiscal year 25 employed 202 on-call and temporary workers. Next slide. I want to share a few pieces of context. So one is that the division has experienced significant staff turnover in recent years. This graphic shows the years of experience with the division for permanent employees who were on staff in 2019 versus 2025. The staff in green have under 4 years of experience with the division, which means they have yet to work every type of election with Multnomah County. Staff in gray have 4 to 10 years of experience, and staff in blue have over 10 years of experience. So you can see that between 2019 and 2025, the number of employees with less experience has increased, while the number of staff with more experience has declined. Several longtime employees departed the division during this time, and staff told us that this has left gaps in institutional knowledge. Of the 11 permanent employees who were on staff in 2019, only 3 are still permanent employees with the division. Go to the next slide. Election workers are also experiencing more stress, both nationally and locally. This slide has a photo of a ballot box that was located next to the Multnomah County Elections Building and which was damaged by an incendiary device in October 2024. Elections Division staff are reporting that their jobs are more stressful than they used to be, and this also reflects a changing national climate for election workers. Research shows that nationwide, election official turnover is increasing, potentially due to increased threats and harassment. Next slide. This is a quote from a former Elections Division employee that I think is a good summary of some of these issues. Quote, "There's been a huge loss of institutional memory in recent years as experienced staff leave. Those who remain are often given workloads and assignments beyond their pay and job descriptions. External pressures are growing, but the real threat is internal. There are good people there, but they won't stay, and I worry that further turnover will precipitate a major systems failure." Go to the next slide. So now to go into some of our more specific findings. So first, we found that the division needs to improve its training to better onboard staff and to minimize the risks of transition and absences. This slide shows results from the anonymous staff survey that we conducted, showing how current and former employees responded when asked if their onboarding prepared them to fulfill their job responsibilities. Only 33% of current staff and 20% of former staff who responded to the survey agreed that they received full and adequate onboarding. Results of the 2023 countywide employee survey also showed that a large portion of employees did not feel they'd received sufficient training. Go to the next slide. In interviews, employees expressed a variety of concerns and frustrations with their onboarding and training, including not receiving an updated copy or any copy of their job description, not being fully informed of their job responsibilities, not receiving an orientation to the division, not having procedures for key responsibilities, and beginning their employment with no onboarding plan. We also heard from staff in our interviews and survey that cross-training in the division is limited. Cross-training is critical to reducing the risk to an election in case a key staff member is absent or leaves their position, and several staff expressed concerns about coverage for their responsibilities if they were unexpectedly absent. The next slide. We also found that the division needs to more consistently update and track updates to its standard operating procedures. This slide shows the survey results from current employees when asked about standard operating procedures. Only half of employees who responded had agreed that the division has written and updated operating procedures for critical functions in their role, and we heard similar concerns in several of our interviews with staff as well. Next slide. In our review of election procedures, we found that the division does not maintain a centralized list of procedures to track updates, and we also found that the vast majority of existing procedures either hadn't been reviewed recently or that review was not documented. So of the 45 procedures that we reviewed, only 4 were reviewed within the last 2 years according to the dates listed on the procedures. Having updated procedures can help the division avoid losing institutional memory when experienced staff members leave, and they're also important particularly for on-call staff who may not remember how to complete a task or know how a process has changed since the last election that they worked. Next slide. We also found that employees are experiencing challenges with the division's work environment. This slide shows survey results from current employees when asked about that issue. Only 42% of staff who responded agreed that the division fosters a positive work environment. And when we looked at the last 3 countywide employee survey results from 2019, 21, and 2023, the division had worsening results over that time. For the 2023 survey, which was the most recent survey we could look at, the division had worse results than the countywide average for most questions. Next slide. In interviews, staff described a variety of challenges with the work environment, including concerns about speaking up and voicing new ideas, a lack of transparency from management, challenges with supervision, and low confidence in the division's commitment to workforce equity. Several longtime on-call employees that we spoke with also talked about a need for better communication from management about shift scheduling and hiring decisions, and both permanent and on-call employees also talked about a lack of support for professional development. Next slide. On these issues, I'll leave you with a quote from a current employee about their work experience. My experience at elections has been filled with frustration and disappointment at the lack of support and preparation. The opportunities for advancement only seem to exist for white staff, and my professional goals as outlined in the performance planning and review process have gone ignored by management. Next slide. So finally, we also wanted to assess how the division staffing compares to other jurisdictions. Comparing across elections jurisdictions can be challenging because elections offices vary widely in size and scope, but we selected 7 comparable and neighboring jurisdictions. All are mid and large size counties with vote by mail, and 2 of them have implemented ranked choice voting. To assess staffing, we looked at the ratio of the ballots processed in the November 2024 election to the number of permanent full-time employees. Our audit report includes a table with the full comparison of all 8 jurisdictions, including Multnomah County. I'm going to share a few takeaways here. And go to the next slide. So we found that that ballots processed to FTE ratio does vary quite a bit across jurisdictions. On this slide, we're comparing how Multnomah County is against our 2 neighboring jurisdictions, as well as Pierce County, Washington, which has a similar population size. And Multnomah County does have a similar ratio to Washington County and a lower ratio than Pierce and Clackamas. Next slide. However, when we compare Multnomah County to King and Denver counties, which are the 2 jurisdictions that our elections division looks to for best practices, Multnomah County has a much higher ratio. Both King and Denver counties have multiple staff dedicated to voter education and outreach, while Multnomah County currently has none. And those jurisdictions also have staff with expertise in voter address mapping, which Mandy's going to get into more shortly. Next slide. So with our recommendations with regard to staffing, we recommend that by next January 2027, the division develop an orientation curriculum for onboarding new employees, develop and implement a cross-training plan to ensure there's sufficient coverage for critical areas of elections administration, create training plans for all supervisors that includes trainings on supervision, conflict resolution, trauma-informed practices, and equity, create a transparent process for employees to pursue professional development opportunities, improve communication with on-call workers, and finally to create a centralized inventory of standard operating procedures and a regular schedule for reviewing all procedures. Go to the next slide, and with that, I'll pass it to Mandy.
Thank you, Danny. So our next finding is the fact that elections has outgrown its main facility. Through our observations of election work, facilities walkthroughs, and from staff feedback, we found that the elections division has outgrown its facility. Next slide, please. So there are a number of challenges with the facility, with the division's main facility, which I will refer to by its name, which is the Dunaway Lovejoy Building. First, there is limited accessibility for voters and employees. There is only one ADA entrance in the lobby. A second entrance on the other wall of the lobby isn't possible due to the slope of the street outside. Also, the staff uses the building's one elevator to move ballots through the facility, but it does have a history of breaking down. They do a great job of trying to get it repaired, but it still does break down frequently. And not having access to this elevator during an election would inhibit the division's ability to process ballots. The elections director has told us that he's looked into installing a second elevator, but there are structural issues within the building that I think make it cost prohibitive. The building is also located in a busy area with no devoted parking to voters, which gets into the next challenge, which is that parking is limited. While there is street parking, the building is centrally located, it can be challenging to find a parking space, and limited parking spaces means it's harder for people with mobility issues to access the building, though I do want to note that there are 4 dedicated disability parking spaces outside of the lobby of the building. We did hear from some on-calls, or we heard that some on-call staff are older, and that is a group of people who are more likely to have mobility issues, so it just adds to the number of people who are struggling to get access to the building easily. Because of the limited parking, the division has obtained temporary permits to secure street parking spaces during elections. That's for elections vehicles and also some spaces for on-call employees knowing that there are some mobility issues. This is helpful and necessary, but it also further limits parking availability to voters, and that's really just a limitation of the building's location. Also, there is not enough space to process ballots during busy elections. So during busy elections, such as a presidential election, the division uses rented warehouse space to unload and prepare ballots. And that's because there just isn't enough space in the Dunaway Lovejoy building to safely accommodate the number of vehicles coming through to deliver ballots and the staff and people who are walking through the same space. So during busy elections, the division uses a rented warehouse space to unload and prepare ballots. And that distance between those buildings is a 14-mile drive, so it's a little bit away. Finally, the building wasn't designed for elections. It was built in 1925, and during elections, there's a lot of vehicle traffic, as I said, that's coming through the building, and the path to exit the building is very narrow for vehicles. And again, we've got people and vehicles trying to navigate the same space. While steps have been taken to sustain the facility as a usable building, it's not an optimal building to meet the division's needs because of these issues around location and accessibility. The Dunaway Lovejoy building is just not a sustainable building for the elections division in the long run. Next slide, please. And so, as I've mentioned, processing ballots in one location is not ideal, or processing them in multiple locations is not ideal. Processing ballots in one location is more efficient and secure, and that's because it eliminates the time needed to drive between locations. Reducing the movement of ballots reduces the chance that something could happen to them during transport. Also, election officials are required to keep a record of every time a ballot moves to a different location. It's just easier to track the movement of ballots when they're going to fewer locations. And I'd like to note that out of the 6 jurisdictions that we spoke to around facilities, all 6 process ballots in a single location, and that includes the city and county of Denver, Salt Lake County, King County, Pierce County, Clackamas County, and Washington County. Next slide, please. So our recommendation regarding building safety recommendations is to develop a new plan for the elections facility, and we'd like to see that done by June of 2027. Next slide, please. And regarding the ballot errors, we found that elections has reduced the risk of ballot errors, but they do need to have more in-house expertise to help continue to reduce that risk. So for context, during the May 2024 primary, the division mistakenly mailed roughly 9,300 ballots that were missing a referendum that should have been included on them. And during a review of these errors, it was discovered that district boundaries had not been updated for 170 registered voters during the last round of redistricting after the US Census. And we want to note here that in 2024, after those errors were discovered, that the division quickly corrected those ballots and sent the corrected ballots out to voters prior to the election. Next slide. So a little bit of context around the ballot errors. They involved something called voter mapping, which is mapping voters' addresses so that we can see exactly where they're located so they can be placed in the proper precinct. There are just things to know that are helpful to understand. There are 15 different types of voting districts in Multnomah County. The frequency and regularity of redistricting varies by district, but at a minimum, updates occur every 10 years after the U.S. Census. It's also important to note that not all voters in a precinct will receive the same ballot, and this is because precincts sometimes split through voting district boundary lines. For example, voters on the west and east sides of a precinct might all be in the same congressional district, but they might have different school districts. So a mistake in mapping a voter's address could place them in the wrong voting district. Currently, 2 staff outside of elections with GIS expertise identify which precincts voters belong to. And GIS stands for Geographic Information System, which is the system that they use to map voter addresses. These GIS experienced staff work in the Department of County Assets and the Department of Community Services. And they use GIS to locate voter addresses to identify which precincts voters belong to. And when they map voting districts, the GIS staff need to identify areas where district boundary lines might cut through a precinct or even a property line so that each voter gets the correct ballot. Between the U.S. censuses, GIS staff will often receive changes to special districts. One of the county GIS specialists we spoke with described the complexity of voting districts as being like a spider web of overlaying boundaries. Next slide, please. So a little bit about why those errors occurred. So after the discovery of the ballot errors in 2024, the county hired a consulting firm called the Elections Group to analyze the mapping-related ballot errors to determine why the errors occurred. And some of the reasons that they found were that data sources had different naming standards. I think this is pretty common in elections. For example, the DMV and the post office use slightly different naming standards. The Elections Division receives data from both. Also, there wasn't enough documentation of the redistricting process itself. The GIS source data that the county received from Metro, it turns out, contained some errors. And so some of the geocodes for people's addresses pointed to the wrong location, and that's why the ballot errors occurred. And unfamiliarity between GIS staff and Elections Division staff about the data and the procedures of each other's counterparts contributed to the error as well. Next slide, please. So we found that the division has taken some steps to prevent these errors from occurring in the future. For example, the county now uses a more reliable source for GIS data. Until recently, the county had been using the GIS data from Metro, but after the Elections Group did this review of ballot errors supplied by Metro, the county has switched to a system called ArcGIS. And that system uses a variety of both government and commercial data sources. So the GIS team told us that ArcGIS uses a robust algorithm and it can accommodate a variety in input sources such as the misspelling of names. So that change should help to contribute from these ballot errors occurring in the future. Also, there is new GIS documentation. The GIS team has created a map of boundaries with voter precincts that the Elections Division can use to search addresses and see them on a map. According to the GIS team, this visualization wasn't available to the Elections Division 2 years ago. The visualization is helpful for the Elections Division staff to better understand the address data that they're working with, and it can also help them potentially see mistakes. Also new in GIS documentation, the county GIS team created a document to help the Elections Division staff understand the technical process that they use in the redistricting. And finally, the division has improved their quality control process. Sometimes there are incomplete addresses or descriptive addresses that are entered in voter registrations, an address such as, for example, Southeast 7th and Clay. And sometimes these addresses were accepted without further investigation, and that led to problems as well. But the division now has a process where if staff have a non-standard address like this in their address library, the address also goes onto a separate spreadsheet where 2 employees both manually check that entry and the formatting and look at the map location to ensure that everything is correct. Next slide, please. So we also found that elections lacks internal GIS expertise. And so there's still a risk that these mapping-related errors could occur, and that's because there isn't an election division staff person with substantive GIS expertise and dedicated time to do GIS work. We think that having staff with both elections and GIS expertise would reduce the risk of ballot errors occurring. And that's because voter district mapping is a complex process and it's specific to elections. And while the county GIS staff who have been working with the elections divisions are experts, they're not experts in elections specifically, they're GIS experts. Having someone on election staff with GIS expertise would allow the division to update their map boundaries and manage their own address file independently. Currently, GIS staff from outside of the elections division don't currently work with the data regularly the way that elections division staff do. It makes more sense to have the people who regularly work with the data map the data, especially given how crucial mapping is to ballot accuracy. Elections is an area where realistically there just isn't room for mistakes. We'd like to note that the elections division did have a longtime staff member with GIS expertise, and that person retired in 2022 prior to redistricting. Additionally, our current GIS staff who work on elections mapping told us that for smaller districts like school, water, and fire districts, the relationship that that former staff person had with the special districts was helpful in getting updated data. So just want to note that relationships are important here. We also found that there could be more cross-training and collaboration. So the elections group recommended that the elections division and GIS staff create an interdepartmental team that cross-trains on each other's tasks. 2 members of the election division that we spoke with have done some cross-training to better understand the work that GIS staff do. However, GIS staff haven't done the cross-training on their counterparts in the elections division. And one of the election staff who has since left, who has had that training, so it's just one person at this point who's done that cross-training. And 5 out of the 6 jurisdictions we spoke with do have internal GIS staff on their team, so that's just a bit of a comparison. Next slide, please. So our ballot error recommendations are that by May of 2026, the elections division should request a GIS staff person. In order to reduce the risk of errors, it's just important to have someone on staff to create and maintain the data, someone who will keep up on changing GIS technology and develop relationships with jurisdictions. It would be most beneficial to the county and its hundreds of thousands of voters to have this person in place before redistricting takes place again in 2031 to help plan and prepare for the process. However, if GIS work continues to happen outside of the elections division should implement a cross-training and collaboration plan for GIS and election staff. Next slide, please. And that is our presentation. We are happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you all so much. Really appreciate all the work on the audit and then the time in presenting us to us today. All right, with that, we'll go to the board for any questions or comments. We'll start with Commissioner Moyer.
Yes, thank you. Also, thank you for meeting with me prior about this audit. That was very helpful. In your comparison work, I appreciate the look at both similar size and best practice counties. And you did look at the budget. I didn't see a comparison on the budget between counties. And I didn't know if that just wasn't in this slide presentation, but I just wondered if you could kind of comment related to where Multnomah County is in the amount of resources we're giving to elections versus similar size and best practice counties.
Thanks for the question, Commissioner. We did look at budget. It can be challenging because some elections offices also include other functions combined with like a clerk or recording office. So I think that's where the budget comparison was challenging. With some jurisdictions, it's also just challenging to obtain their budget data. So it wasn't a point of emphasis for us. We looked more at just the base level staffing. But I can look back and see if there's some information that could be shared with you on budget that wasn't included in the report.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. When talking about the facility, one of the difficult, give and takes is having a location that is accessible or easily found by the public versus a large enough space to do all election operations. When you looked at our building and then the buildings of other jurisdictions, how large of a building would we need to incorporate not having to transfer ballots?
That is a good question, and one that I'm not going to completely answer for you. And that is because I think it really depends on what kind of facilities plan the Elections Division would like to create. And what I mean by that is some jurisdictions have like large, like one level more or less, like warehouse facilities, essentially, where they're doing ballot processing. And if we could do anything, like, I think that would be a great idea for us. But other options are that maybe I think it depends on if you're having like multiple satellite locations where voters can go and access, support, and vote and register, and then you've got a separate site for processing, or if you've got a place where you're doing both at the same location. So I think that will determine size. We have something called the Voting Center Express, which is out in Gresham. It's out in the community health center there. It's a tiny space in terms of receiving customer service, but it's a good enough size space for supporting voters. It's got a big, beautiful parking lot. What it doesn't have is the ability or the space in which to process ballots. Elections might not need a huge facility if they're using a facility that is processing only, and then they've got some small satellite sites. It really just depends on how they like to move forward. And I will say that, if the division had multiple locations for people to come and receive voting support, the Dunaway Lovejoy building would be a great building. Like, it's be one of many great buildings, and there are ways in which a central location is fabulous. But if it's your only real location year round, that's where it becomes problematic.
I know that there's a lot of concern right now related to election integrity and security. From your findings, should we be confident in the professionalism of our elections division?
Yes, definitely. I think there was a quote at the beginning, or our acknowledgement at the beginning of the presentation. Staff at every level of the elections division are really committed to making sure every vote counts, that people can trust the process. They have really robust processes for, everything from like signature checking to how ballots move through equipment. People can really feel confident in our voting system. Our job here is to recommend areas for improvement so that can support elections and the great work they do far into the future. So if we didn't see cause for concern, people can trust our elections process.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. Commissioner Singleton.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you all. It's so good to see you, Sunniva. We used to have the pleasure of working together, so great to see you here. I have just a few questions. On the staff survey, I wasn't clear on if it was full-time, on-call, and temp staff who were included, and I get that might be hard. So curious about that and how many respondents we had.
Sure. So we did separate surveys for permanent and limited duration current and former staff, and then a survey of on-call staff. Our presentation, and I think the report also doesn't include any of the survey results from the on-call staff, because largely the results were pretty positive. But for that, I know we had a 67% response rate, I want to say, out of a pool of maybe 260 on-call workers. Don't quote me exactly, but ballpark. For the survey of the current permanent and limited duration staff, we received 12 responses, so it was about a 75% response rate, and then we received 5 responses from former staff.
Thank you. Those are awesome response rates for surveys, so I always want to tease that out because it makes it so much more powerful what the information you gathered from that was. So in that section where you talk about the employees needing support, there's a comment that is staff have experienced challenges with supervision and conflict management. And I wasn't clear if that was in having to deal with de-escalation with public, or there was something internal that was being pointed to.
I think that was mostly addressing internal, like how staff negotiate disagreement with each other. Though there was also kind of a thread we heard from interviews about, particularly after some of the major incidents that happened for staff with the ballot box damage and then the damage to the windows of the building the following January, that staff did want, some staff did mention wanting more kind of emotional support and trauma-informed support for that as well.
Thank you. And I know when it gets crowded, people can get challenging to deal with, so I appreciate that. I don't have any other questions for you all. I just want to appreciate the work and the call out, frankly, around voter education and outreach. That was something that I was really pleased to get support from the board on, at least putting some funding into that, because East County and the city of Maywood Park, which is in my district, did not get voter education outreach as part of the Portland first ranked choice voting. And I think it's really critical that we continue to make sure that communities that didn't already receive that education actually get that opportunity. So it's something I'll continue to keep an eye on, knowing that it may not be as robust as the program used to be, but making sure that we have some sort of effort, because ranked choice voting can be a little disarming when folks first see it if there isn't that opportunity to learn a little bit more. I also just wanted to highlight, because I've been getting questions about from constituents and state legislators about on the aftermath of the raid in Fulton County around elections. And since we're talking about it, I just wanted to state on the record some things that I learned from the division. And please, Director, if I missed something, please feel free to come on up. But that the Secretary of State in Oregon, Tobias Reed, is really taking the lead around contingency planning and coordinating closely with county clerks, which I really appreciate the state stepping in for that role. But also what Fulton County didn't have, but we have, is a recent court ruling that protects our voter rolls. And so I just wanted to say that out loud, because I know there's a lot of anxiety about that, and we have some different circumstances here. So thank you all for the work and for this presentation, and I look forward to hearing from the division as some of the recommendations are moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Brehm-Edwards.
Good morning. Thank you for the audit. I have a question for audit. I have some comments, but I also have a question for the auditor, and then also a question for the elections division.
So this will be the auditor, questions for the auditor staff, and then we'll go through all the commissioners. And then if there are questions for the division, we'll ask them to come up afterwards.
Okay, so I'll ask my one. I'll ask my one question now, and then I'll ask the other one questions, and I'll make my comments after I have a chance to hear from the elections division. First of all, thank you. I always say that I see audits as a tool for continuous improvement, and really appreciate the recommendations that were presented. Probably now more than ever, this audit is important, because I think it points to, I think, the good work that our elections staff do at a time in which the sort of Trump administration is sort of calling into question the integrity of elections processes across the country that it's important for this community to know that our elections division does a great job at delivering fair elections, and that voters have their ballots counted. And I think the audit points to places where we can further strengthen. So really appreciate the timeliness of this and the recommendations that were made. I'm noting that the management response from the chair and the division accepts most of the recommendations from the auditor, and that there's plans for implementation, so that's great. I'm not going to ask about any of those. And then there's a couple of places where the management did not fully agree. In some cases, those were budget related. One of the questions I had was related to the voter education program. When I first sort of skimmed through, which is always a dangerous thing, to do the recommendations, I noticed there was $260,000 for the voter education, and I was thinking back to the budget process where there was the amendment added for $100,000 for very specific targeted outreach, and in your audit, I'm thinking, well, that's $100,000 towards the 260, but in your audit, you appeared to differentiate between that allocation of funds and the 260 that you're focused on. So my question is what was, so maybe explain that. And then the follow-on question is, it's the 260 on top of the 100K is what, I mean, the 100,000 was already allocated. Is it 260,000 on top of that? Oh, just to clarify that you're recommending.
Yes. The $260,000, that was the cost for the voter education program. So the ranked choice voting grant, I think, could be more accurately seen as part of the ranked choice voting campaign to educate Multnomah County voters and those new to ranked choice voting outside of the city of Portland. So that's really important, but that should be rolled into voter education program. That includes education about participation, education about how to become a candidate, and focusing on those low turnout precincts. And also, like we noted, the federal act about informing and assisting folks with disabilities. So it's about that outreach work, and the ranked choice voting grant is an important part of that constellation of work, but it's not a comprehensive program. You know, it would be like education about a flu virus specifically or COVID, as opposed to like a health education and outreach program that's about all the aspects of health. So the voter education program was a multi-pronged approach, and it's not staffed now. So the ranked choice voting manager runs the grant along with other county staff that are assisting in that. So that grant is part of the ranked choice campaign for this first 2026 election in the county.
So the 260,000 would be in addition to the 100,000 that's already been allocated?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there are ways to look at how that could, there was a program technician position that would be significantly less than 260, and that wasn't included in the reduction because that was funded one time only for a few years. So it's about what type of presence does elections have out in the community versus education on the specific aspect of voting that's being done through CBOs. So it's about an ongoing cumulative program versus a specific campaign.
Okay, thank you. That's the only questions I have for you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Jones-Dixon.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for auditor team for the presentation. I don't have any questions, just a comment. Over the last 6 years, been engaging directly with the elections office. The customer service has been top notch. I just want to express my gratitude to Director Scott Edward specifically, and the rest of the team. And then lastly, just extremely appreciative of the recommendations and the responses as well. So it's a good faith effort. And thank you again for the presentation this morning.
Thank you all so much. I actually did have one question, and it had to do about the transport and the new facility, because obviously the facility is not ideal for, especially for being the largest county in the state. So I appreciate you looking into that. But all ballots have to be transported, right? Because we have mail-in voting, so whether it is taking them, transporting them from drop boxes to a place where the ballots are tallied, or like the U.S. Postal Service, right, delivering them. So is the concern that there's like multiple transports that are needed at this point? I just wanted to dig into that a little bit.
Sure, no, that's a great question. And yes, ballots do get moved all over the place. But this is just one more additional leg of a journey for a ballot that is not necessary. Yeah, and without getting into like security issues, it's simpler, easier, and more efficient to manage both security and the path of the ballot if it's traveling as little as possible.
Thank you so much. So again, I just want to give my big thanks, Auditor McGurk, to you and everyone who participated in this. I appreciate that you guys looked into this after, because it had been 15 years, and I think especially because of the pressure that we're seeing at the federal level around elections and the misinformation that's out there, making sure that we're doing what we can to have a strong, solid, and trusted elections process is really important. So thank you all very much. I'm going to invite Tim Scott and Margie Bradway down, because I know that there was one question. Auditor, you want to stay here for that? Okay, great. Yeah. So as we normally do during these audits, we want to give the auditors a chance to talk, and then often the board does have questions. So Commissioner Brim-Edwards, you had a question, and it sounds like Commissioner Singleton, you do as well. And then if Commissioner Moyer or Jones-Dickson have any, then I'll go to you next.
Thank you for all you do. Having interacted with Multnomah County elections since I first registered to vote in 1979, I've had a great experience. And I know that as I said before, the integrity of the process is now more than ever important. A question about I'm going to go back. This is somewhat related to the GIS issue and the reference earlier to the sort of ballots changing and kind of the impact that might have on the Elections Division. In May of 2023, this wasn't a GIS issue, but it was more just a proofing issue. That there were about 500,000 ballots that were reprinted the week before the election. I was trying to remember what the cost was. It was like 300,000.
I'm Tim Scott. I'm the Director of Elections for Multnomah County. It was approximately 350,000.
Okay. And just to be clear with everything, the ballots that went out to voters were correct.
That's correct.
Yeah, I just wanted to change it, but it was something that when things are caught beforehand and corrected, there's still a cost. And so as I think about this, is like, how do we mitigate any sort of costs? It's better to, I think, move expenses upstream and pay for things, hopefully to lessen any possibility of having to pay for things retroactively. Another question I had was in this last May election, I understand that there were just fewer costs associated with it, and I'm wondering, were there funds that were left from that May election that are still sitting in elections?
So it was actually the November election. I'm sorry that we gave you the wrong information, but the special election in the odd year, we have to budget at an adequate amount to cover a full-scale election if we get multiple districts filing for that election. There's nothing that is required to be put. No candidate offices file on the November odd year election, but as we saw last November, City of Portland had a measure which is almost countywide. So we have to budget adequately for a full-scale election, but with only the City of Portland and a very small school district using the ballot, there was some savings, about $400,000.
Okay. And thank you. And then my other question is, if the voter education program that was referenced, that wasn't funded in this year's budget, were funded in next year's budget, really the planning and implementation of that couldn't happen till June, correct? I mean, till the budget, till you know you actually have the funds?
I'm not sure I'm understanding.
Yeah, I think you're asking, so last year's voter education program was eliminated via budget cuts, and the auditor's office did a good job of explaining that. I think what you're asking is if there was a circumstance in which the voter education program was reinstated.
So I'm going to look to Kathy Short real quick. I just want to make sure we're not getting into grounds where we're talking about next year's budget before we're able to talk about it.
This is more about, maybe I can rephrase it, because I think it's more about, it's not whether it's in or not, but it's just like about
ramp up,
like how long it takes to ramp up. So conceptually, things can't move forward until like the board has actually approved the budget.
Yeah, I want Tim to talk about this a little bit, but resources can be a limiting capacity, but it's really the staff capacity that is our biggest limitator right now. So for example, we have no one FTE that is focused on voter outreach. And so when the grant program was passed, the current ranked choice voting manager, who also works on results, who also works on the IGA with City of Portland, also had to take that as, add that to their plate. And so what you'll see in elections is people with very, very heavy workloads. So even if something was reinstated, it's about staff capacity at this point to spend money. And I'm trying not to get in a budget deliberation, but I'm trying to get at the heart of kind of what you're asking. I don't know, Tim, if you want to go into that.
Yeah, I think there is only so much we can do with one-time only funds or funds that are going to expire at the end of a fiscal year when we have an unexpected budget, the money that we have left over from the November election, we are looking at using that for things which aren't in our budget, like our forklift broke, and we have to replace that. It was 40 years old, it was tired, and it broke, and we need to get a new one. And that's $50,000. So we're in the position now that we have some additional funding left over, and our vendor for the high-speed sorters, of which we have two, said, oh, and by the way, Windows 10 is obsolete, and we need to upgrade all the servers. And that's $100,000. So we're in a fortunate position that we have some funding that we can tackle those things which are necessary operationally. And it's also difficult to take that funding and use it for unplanned expenditures that are not operational in nature, things that would take more planning. I think Leah Benson, our ranked choice voting project manager, has done an excellent job of being a leader in getting the county ready for ranked choice voting. And a lot of focus has been on the grant program right now, which is on the street, and we're getting significant response to it, and we're looking forward to releasing those funds before the end of the fiscal year. But there's not a whole lot of time for her to kind of shift into what would we do with another, as far as educating voters, creating a plan. We have plans for fiscal year 2027, but those are pending the decision of the board. around the one-time only funding continuing for that.
Great, and we will leave that conversation.
Stop there.
That answered my question, and I think it stayed out in the right lane. So this is just a comment, so thank you for answering those questions. Given what's happening nationally with the Trump administration seeking to sort of undermine the integrity of our democracy by calling into question the credibility and integrity of election processes at the state level, I'm concerned about potentially waiting for funding in the FY26 budget to fund the recommendations, specifically recommendation number 1, the reinstatement of the voter education program. As the auditor notes, quote, the county risks weakening equitable access to election division resources and voter education, end quote, because of the lack of funding for that. Ranked choice voting in county races will be new, and just as with the city election last year, education with our community will be needed. I'm concerned about geographic disparities that were noted in the cities in the overvoting in East Portland, which could, I think, be partially addressed by voter education. In addition, the loss of in-house GIS mapping expertise potentially risks undermining the credibility of elections if ballot mistakes are made, more due to the complexity of the overlapping. And I think most voters don't ever think about it when they get that ballot, that maybe they have something that's like completely unique, that's different from somebody that maybe lives 10 blocks away, and just the complexity of how that works. So I'm concerned about the complexity in getting it right without having that in-house expertise that the county elections office used to have. Instead of waiting for the next year's budget, I'm drafting a potential budget modification that I'll consult with the chair about, that would address both the voter education program and adding that GIS capacity. Again, I'm concerned about waiting till next year with the uncertainty, and I would be looking at both either contingency funding, some of the remainder of the November election funds, but we'll consult obviously with the chair about that. But again, I really appreciate the work you're doing, because the national narrative that's being pushed by the administration, I think goes, it really is attempting to undermine our democracy, when in fact, in this country, it's quite amazing that every vote I believe gets counted, and we have had very fair, inclusive elections. So thanks for the work that your team does, and the expanded team when it comes to election times.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Singleton, you had a question for the department.
Thank you, and thank you for the point about one-time only funds. It's those decisions that have us in some of the position that we're in now at the county. My one question is around that staff support concerns that I mentioned with the auditor's team, and I'm curious what has been done or is planned to be done to address those concerns.
I'll kick us off, and then I think going back to the big picture, and a few things to note, they were pulling from employee surveys of the past and not this most current employee survey. But a couple of things that were recommended. So first, better onboarding. DCS did roll out this year a new onboarding tool. It's been very successful. It's a 6-month process that's led by Danelle Bronco and our equity manager, Dimitri, and it includes a mentorship program. So every new employee gets a mentor, so that's new this year. That does not address, though, the subject matter expertise that's also needed in elections. So the DCS is a broader onboarding tool, and I think Tim would agree that we need better standing operating procedures and training on those SOPs in elections, which is a recommendation that we accepted. And then the other thing that we've done, and Tim can get into the details on this, but really making sure they get team training. So we have a facilitator, even before the November election, I was calling Tim saying, let's get an all-day retreat with staff, work on that team training. They all did their DISC profiles, because really understanding how people show up under stress is super important, and being able to work at a team, which I think works as I think the stress My theory is, and if you've ever been in the elections office during election, the amount of stress they have is so incredibly high. Not only do they have the world looking at it, but they've got all the cameras, they've got all the candidates, and in those stress situations, the staff stay incredibly professional, incredibly calm, but they also have to work out potential conflicts during that very high stress, high stakes situation. So making sure we have enough teamwork, and did you have a team retreat working on a more team training and team retreat, working with Sue Mary and organizational learning, so we are doing some of that work.
Yeah, I want to thank the auditor. I think that the audit process was really thorough, that all the staff were given an opportunity to weigh in. We are continuing to try to pick away at improving the culture at elections. We're working with organizational learning to kind of develop what's next. We got some feedback in December from staff after a retreat in the fall before the election. That's the other challenge. We have to work out around these pesky elections. And so giving the audit the time to complete and have the report to see how that aligned with direct feedback we were getting from staff. I also conducted a 360 in December, kind of taking all that feedback, and there's no surprises. It all aligns with kind of what shows up in the audit, gives us a good direction to work with organizational learning to identify next steps. So we're in that process right now, offering anything from facilitated conversations to listening sessions with staff to really develop a plan for how we want to move forward next. And of course, as there's a vast menu of opportunities through organizational learning, looking how to bring those trainings directly to our team in the time that we have before the May election.
I just wanted to provide a little bit of minor correction or addition, which is while we did look at past results of the countywide employee survey, the interviews we did and the surveys we did were done, last year. So
that's fair.
So I just wanted to provide that additional context.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I want to appreciate the transparency and accountability of making these improvements. I think it's a really, those are two important indicators of leadership. And so I hope that the surveys look different and that there's an intention to do some follow-up with people to see if what the interventions that you're putting in place are actually affecting that change that folks are looking for. So I appreciate the work. And I just want to thank you all for working so much with me and my team to make sure these existing dollars did get out the door, to make sure that some folks who haven't had that education before get it. I know it's a lot of work on top of your existing work, so thank you for leaning into that and making sure it got done.
Of course.
Thank you. Online, Commissioner Moyer or Commissioner Jones-Dickson, any questions for the department?
No, just a statement of happy that you're incorporating this feedback, and I look forward to seeing the results.
Thank you, Commissioner Moyer. Commissioner Jones-Dickson?
Yeah, just continued gratitude, but no additional comments or questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and I just want to also share my thank yous to all the work that is done. I think we have the best elections team in the state, and
Agreed.
yes, and and just appreciate all the work that's done, and again appreciate the work that was done to shed some light on what's happening with this. So thank you, Auditor. Thank you, Tim and Margie.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So with that, we will move on to our second item for today, which is a transportation fee study recommendations. Emily?
R2, transportation fee study recommendations and resolution to update fees.
Yes, thank you. May I have a motion? So moved. Second. Commissioner Singleton moves, Commissioner Brim Edwards seconds. Approval of R2. Good. Hello. Oh, hi.
Hello, good morning. I'm back. For the record, my name is Margie Bradway, DCS Director, she, hers. We're here today to present on transportation our Transportation Division's fee study. This is the third fee study that you've seen from our division. Again, responding to budget notes and budget inquiries. I want to thank in particular Commissioner Moyer, who really pushed us in last budget to look deeply at our transportation fees, and this is really a response to her line of questioning as well as the overall budget note from this board to study fees. With no further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Transportation Deputy Director Jessica Berry.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Jessica Berry. I'm the Deputy Director of the Transportation Division. Next slide. So today we'll give you a presentation on our transportation fees and the study we did. I'll give you an overview of the permit program, a little conversation about the fee study itself, the methodology, and our results, and then the action that is requested today. There's a resolution associated with this presentation. Next slide. As an overview of our permit program, this is an example of types of permits that we issue in the right-of-way. Generally speaking, we refer to them as right-of-way permits. So that's anything that happens, between the public or the private property on one side of the road to the private property on the other side of the road. That might include ditches, sidewalks, bike lanes, the roadway itself. That is all the right-of-way. Our permit program issues permits for anything that happens in the right-of-way that we want to make sure that we're maintaining the safety of the community and our traveling public. These kinds of permits, examples of permits can include special events permits you see up there. There's a driveway permit. In the lower right corner, that's a kind of a utility permit, which is also a sort of catch-all phrase for any permits we issue in the right-of-way to utilities. And then in the lower left, that is an example of a construction permit, which is a large permit where we get fee recovery. That is an example from Wood Village when they put in a sidewalk and a planting strip and bike lane and then repave part of the road. We sometimes call that a frontage improvement, but those are the higher cost projects that are full cost recovery. Again, this is kind of only 4 examples here. There are 60 different permit types in our code, and some of them are not as highly used anymore. And you'll see later in the recommendations that we have a kind of a plan for dealing with that long term. Next slide. Okay, a little overview of the program. So there are a small handful of dedicated staff that spend most of their time in the program, but overall there's 8 staff across the division: administration, planning, engineering, inspection staff, people that work mostly on Willamette River bridges, people work mostly on roads. They all contribute their time to this part of the program, to the issuing and inspecting of permits. Annually, we issue approximately 290 permits. That does not include over-dimensional. It's listed as freight here because that's easier to understand, but over-dimensional are big vehicles. They're either very wide or very tall or very heavy. We issue 2,500 of those permits per year. Those are set by statute as only $8 per permit, but they're pretty easy to issue. So seeing a lot of those we don't kind of factor that into the overall permit fee program necessarily. They're lower impact permits to issue. Overall, the revenue that is made, or the recovered costs for issuing these permits, is about $200,000 a year, and the program itself, with all the staffing and the costs associated with that, is about $1 million. Next slide. So as part of the fee study, we did a we survey of other Oregon counties, and we sent it out to all 36 counties. We worked through the Oregon Association of County Engineers and Surveyors to send it out. We heard back from 13 counties, and in the fee study itself, you'll see the results of that, but here's kind of a summary. Generally, the staff really ranges, as you can imagine, across the state. There are some counties that are very low populous. They might have 1 person issuing the permits. And then the higher populous counties, places where there's more work in the unincorporated areas, one of the counties has 13 employees. Their revenues range also from some counties collect no fees at all for their permit program. And then some counties, one county collects almost $900,000, or just over $800,000, excuse me. And that is a county in the metro area that has a higher population and a lot more activity outside of cities and in the county's areas. Also, we asked the counties about fee waivers. There's a variety. Some offer no fee waivers. Some offer fee waivers just at the director's discretion or based on financial hardship. It really varied. There were different, I think about 8 counties did have different types of fee waivers, but it wasn't super consistent about what they were waiving fees for. And then we asked the counties how often they review their fees or update them. One county reviews their fees every 6 months, but does not update it regularly, just kind of evaluates and assesses. One county has not updated them since they implemented them in '94. Our last update was in 2020, and when we updated it then, some of our fees had not been updated since the 80s. So we are interested in evaluating and updating more regularly. Next slide. Also, as part of the fee study, we did a desk review. So we looked at, went to the websites of all the counties to see if they posted their fee schedules online and how they categorized their fees and what they charged. I will say, generally speaking, Multnomah County's fees are kind of in the middle of what you see in the counties. We also looked at a couple of cities in the metro area. So we looked at Gresham, then we looked at Gresham, Beaverton, and Portland to see what their fees were. Our fees, many of our fees currently, not what we're proposing, but currently set at about $250 per permit. So kind of in the mid-range of most of these. Our special event permits, when they are on the Willamette River bridges, are kind of unique and they have more impact to staff and to the community, and that one we have set at, is currently and proposed to the future to be set at cost recovery. So that's a fee where somebody pays a deposit and then we reimburse against it. Next slide. And then we also talked to the staff that issue permits to find out sort of, has anything changed since 2020? Have we been collecting the right amount based on the workload for them? So what we found is there's a couple of permit fees that we set in 2020. We didn't have a good sense of the time associated with issuing the permit. And what we found is it's a lot more time intensive. So there's I think 2 fees that are going up more significantly because they take more time for staff than we had realized. Similarly, there's some permits that are less labor intensive, and so they are, there's a few where we proposed reducing the fee, or what we found is certain types of drainage-related fees are kind of already captured in a construction permit, so we reduced that one to 0 in the case that it's associated with a construction permit. There were other flat fees there where staff felt based on the type of permit that was issued or the length of the permit, it was multiple pages to review. And when there's multiple pages to review, it's more staff time. So they requested that there be some tiered cost fees. So those are in the proposal as well. And then we heard really clearly from staff that they'd like a consistent and clear fee waiver process because they want to know clearly when it's okay to waive a fee or not waive a fee. Next slide. All right, so we developed some recommendations, and you'll see in the resolution, well, I'll go over the recommendations and then I'll talk about the resolution. So what we did was we proposed raising all of the fees by 5%, or in this particular update, raising all fees by 5%. We did this in part because the state has a rule of how much we can charge utility permits, and that is 5% or consumer price index, whichever is lower. This year, consumer price index is 2.9, but we propose raising all the fees by 5% this year since it's been 5 years since we did a fee increase. We also propose that we have a regular increase annually of 5% or CPI. This, again, is consistent with what the state allows for us to do with utility permits. So we thought setting that for all of our permits would do 2 things. One is it would really create consistency for the applicants, and it would create an easy explanation for staff when they are letting applicants know and prepare for permits and permit fee increases. We also recommend developing a fee waiver program, a reduction program, allowing the director to set a fee waiver program. And then also, as I noted, that there's 60 different permit types. Long-term, we'd like to do, not long-term, but in like the next 3 to 5 years, we'd like to update the code chapters 27 and 29 to more accurately reflect the environment that we're in now and the types of permits that we collect, just for ease of understanding for the public. And then finally, we also recommend evaluating the fees every 5 years. The last time I came up here with a fee increase in 2020, I wanted to do it every 2 years, but that feels a little rapid for how we are able to do things. So 5 years felt reasonable, especially compared to sort of how the other counties do things. So then the last slide, next slide, please. This is what's in your resolution. The resolution would update all permit fees, increasing most by 5% and lowering a few, and then setting an annual update by 5% or CPI, whichever is lower, and authorizing the director to develop and implement a fee waiver program. And with that, I can take any questions.
Thank you so much, both of you. We do have one person signed up for public comment on this, so I will ask you just to step back and we'll do public comment, and then we'll go to the board for questions.
And we have Charles Bridge-Crane Johnson.
Good morning again. I'm Bridge-Crane Charles Simca Johnson, and let's just get to the rudimentary. If you want money, you have to go where the money is. So turnip people, which we think we're going to, poor people such as myself, those who we think might be applying for a fee waiver, and it would be interesting to see if there's any speculation about thresholds for fee waivers and such like that. That's something I think we need to talk about. The other thing is like, we talked, it seems like there's a lot of state cap issues right here. And we would like to believe that, for a long time, the state government and the Democratic majority has had supposedly progressive positions. But in many ways, the reality is that I believe that DEI is good, important, but it's often a complete lie when it comes from our governments. If you believe in equity, you push for progressive taxation and progressive fees. A person who's driving a $200,000 car at 100 miles per hour doesn't give a crap about the pricing of a speeding ticket when it's a set fee. And I think you really should look at fees that are indexed to the costs of the projects. Of course, developers will actually crap their pants about this idea, but we need to consider the fact that we have a housing supply problem here. But the idea that we're going to make lower income people go through a fee waiver process just to keep from paying the same fee that might be a few days' wage from them, and then this fee is the same for a huge development corporation, really isn't equity. So I think it's maybe beyond the scope of this, but both here at the county level and the state level, we need to look at, if we want to get, we have a situation of cost recovery where we're at 20% cost recovery, and the state says we're capped. To close that gap, we can only move towards that gap at 5% per year. It seems like it's something maybe we need to take up with the legislature, and that the legislature itself could also have a project cost instead of a, we think we'll make things based on the cost of the service. I'm not an expert, I'm not a MERP, don't have a master's in urban or regional planning or anything like that, but if we want to get to cost recovery for this department, we need to look at bringing in revenue proportionate to the project revenue. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Great timing. We'll go ahead and go to the board for questions. We'll start with Commissioner Singleton.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for the work on this and the presentation. This countywide fee assessment, kind of this broader conversation we're having about fee assessments in multiple places, and I think I have a similar question. Director, you'll not be surprised, but I just want to again make sure when we're thinking about fee waivers, how is that connecting to where we talked about it in land use for you all, and then also back to that larger across the enterprise, how are we getting some consistency around our fee waivers?
Right.
Or fee waiver process,
Yeah.
I should say.
Thank you, Commissioner Singleton, and I can't speak to the enterprise, but our CEO can. In terms of DCS, we're doing exactly that. So the first step is actually making sure it's clear in statute that the director has the authority to waive. So that is in your resolution today. And then the second part would be developing kind of an operational policy on when to waive it. And Jessica has a copy of the land use. We're one department. It would probably look pretty closely at the land use one and mirror it to some extent, but we do have differences from land use compared to transportation. So for example, land use, we had a discussion about Native American tribes who are active in the gorge. That's not really an issue specific to transportation, so we might look at that one differently, but certainly looking at hardship as we did in land use. So we're trying to be consistent with our department and also making sure we have clear and open communication with the COO's office on these waivers as well.
Thank you, and I see Justin coming on down.
Everybody, for the record, Justin Black, use he, him pronouns, Deputy COO. I think for the broader enterprise, it's setting some standards around what the fee exception looks like for all departments and all fees. And I think that's expansive, so where you get a bunch of exceptions, like Mario, you talked about tribal governments, and setting that exception in kind of a policy for the county, whether or not tribal governments use that fee exception or not. I think the other thing to understand is that a lot of our fees are regulated by the state, and we don't have a lot of power over what we can exempt and what we can't exempt. So creating a framework, but then also documenting when we can't abide by that framework, and also just kind of having everybody on the same page and understanding, and put it in a format where everybody understands what the exceptions are and what they aren't.
Thank you. That is exactly what I've been getting at, so I really appreciate that that's the approach. And I think my question will be, how will people know that they should apply for the waivers? I feel like there's sometimes, and this came up a lot in some other places recently, but just that there's things that we're doing that are exceptions, but then only people who know to ask end up getting them. And so how do we plan to make sure folks know that they can request that?
I can speak for land use. After implementing it, we did put it on our website, and we got our first request last week from a tribe. So it is active and working, but I hear your point. And I'll just say from my perspective, it's interesting where the code did not allow any waiver versus where it did. So MCAS, that authority exists. It did not exist in land use, did not exist in transportation. Actually, Jessica, you don't know this, but I was talking to head of survey yesterday, and I don't think it's allowed in our survey. So it really takes going each program part by part, making sure the authority exists in the first place. I do like keeping the waiver criteria at an operational level because it does allow that flexibility to pivot. You don't have to actually do a code change to be able to flex a little bit in this, changing world that we operate in.
And I think on the enterprise, and I can't find the document, so I'm kind of operating off of memory here. But I think that one of the recommendations is to actually document the waiver where people pay for it. So on the website, when you're kind of going through that process of paying, have some documentation that says, click here to understand what waivers are available. So just mirroring the two so that you don't have to go searching the county website for the random page.
Awesome, thank you. Just one other question on the last slide. You have, it says update all permit fees, and it says increasing the cost of some, lowering the cost of others. But then in the report, there's a line that says, report says we're recommending increase all by 5%.
That's a really good clarifying question. So, so what we did in the fee study is that, and you can see in the appendix that it identifies the current fee and the proposed adjustment, and then the 5% increase on it. So say for a traffic impact study, the current fee I think was $250, and staff said that's not high enough for how much time it takes to review. So then it is an example, but it's not a great one because you brought about lowering costs. But basically we then we updated the fee to set it representative of the time it takes them to do it, and then we applied the 5% increase off every one of them.
Gotcha. And so conversely, if the fee was lowered, that happened, and then
Yeah.
5%. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. That's super helpful. I'll do some follow-up with you all. I just have some questions about some of the caps at the state, and curious about if we need to have some conversation for our next statewide agenda. So I'll follow up with you all to talk about that later. Thank you.
Thank you. I will say that I remember when the $500 cap on utilities was put in place on that, and it was lots of discussion and lots of swirl in the legislature when that bill was moving forward. So appreciate that. Commissioner Brim Edwards.
Thanks for the report. A couple questions, and then just a couple questions about this report. Did you say that the fee waiver is in the ordinance? Because I'm not seeing it.
No, it's not. So the
okay.
resolution today, and this is something we worked with the attorney's office, one of the questions we had for Nick, our attorney, was to clarify in the resolution that the Director of Transportation would in fact have the authority to waive the fees. So that is in the packet today that you'd be voting on.
Right, so it's, this is also complementing Commissioner Singleton's question. So where will it actually appear?
I think this might be similar to how land use did it. You adopted a resolution that allows the director of land use to set the fees, and it is because.
Well, yeah, you keep it, the criteria itself is an operational policy, right? So unlike in land use, we came back and we said this is the kind of operational policy that the director would use to make that decision, but that criteria itself is not embedded in your resolution. Your resolution just stays at high level, says the director can waive fees. Is that?
Right, it's still though like discretionary and maybe not.
Well, we'd have to have a policy, and if it's a published policy, then we would stick to that published policy. It's just not at that code level.
And for instance, the land use one is on the webpage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. And so it's a clear policy. All staff know it. Our policies usually live in comments. It's accessible internally. It's accessible externally. It's a policy. But the director would have the ability to change it if needed, to be clear.
Do most of these fees get paid online or in person? Mostly online. So would there be like online when somebody's going to click I'm applying for X permit, that there would be a like explanation of the fee waiver?
Yeah, we
can.
can.
Is that how you envision it?
That is how I envision it. I actually made a note of it when Justin was talking. We can both post it on the website, and then we can build it into the permit application. So the application to apply for a permit is through a web portal online, and the waiver can be built into that portal.
Yeah, that's what we did for land use, exactly.
My experience just with the public school system is like marrying it where the actual, here's where you click the, what you're gonna pay is like really important. For example, schools have a lot of facilities that they permit out, and there is a process for Title I schools and community groups to get a fee waiver or fee reduction, but it's really important that it be married right with because otherwise what happens is you get the community they see the non-fee reduction or the non-fee waiver, and like we can't possibly afford that, and so they just like exit out of the process versus seeing it right there and understanding actually what they'd pay is really important. So I'm glad to hear that's contemplated. And then just so I understand, it looks like there's currently a gap between the cost of the services provided and the revenue, and it's between 200,000 and a million, so about 800 cost gap. And then, so there's a nodding of head, so that's the yes. I'm curious, it looks like when you're describing the sort of how you're addressing cost recovery is for the smaller projects is usually a flat fee, but am I correct in reading it, those things over $10,000, that those are more based on actual costs?
Generally, yes. So if it's really labor intensive, if it's really building something new, like that example I showed the photo of, that our inspectors out there every day, our engineer probably spends 8 days reviewing, so that would be a cost recovery permit. Portland Water Bureau is a cost recovery permit, for example. Those are permits where we have set up a code, they pay a deposit, our staff bill our time against that deposit. But when it's a lower cost permit, the cost of all of that administration is pretty high. Yeah.
Exactly. So with the new fee schedule, will that close the gap between that currently exists between the 200,000 that the county collects and the million? Because or is just are the vast majority of the permits in that lower category that is not subject to cost recovery?
It will not significantly close the gap. The real reason for that is related to what Commissioner Singleton asked about, which is that the state sets utility fees capped at $500. 90% of our permits are utility permits. So we will never be able to close that gap unless the state changes that rule.
Okay. Good to know. But I appreciate the full cost recovery on the larger projects, as I'm assuming because they're larger projects, people have the capacity to pay for the actual cost of the service they're getting. And then my last question just relates to like any sort of engagement with the community members or businesses that may be paying a changed fee that's anything besides sort of this 5% or the sort of COLA adjustment.
So we will do the engagement we need after. If the board approves this fee increase and it would go into effect July 1, we will do significant engagement around these fee updates. As I said, the vast majority are utility permits. They're already anticipating this increase because it was built into state law, that 5%. So most of our customers are kind of aware of this already, and then the other customers we will do engagement with. And then those big projects, we're already cost recovery. So it's actually impacting a small number of our permits, honestly.
So if the commission approves this, do you anticipate that there's going to be any people who are like getting a surprisingly large increase, or pretty much people like it's known out there, or just that segment is so small?
It's pretty small. I think on some of them it's like $13 increase, so it's not, we don't anticipate a lot of consternation. We will definitely work to make people comfortable with it as it's coming, because we'll have time, assuming you approve today, we'll have time to do the outreach before July 1.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Jones-Dickson, any questions?
No, actually, my questions were asked from Commissioner Singleton and Commissioner Brim Edwards. So go team, go. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Moyer, any questions?
Yes, thank you for this work. I appreciate it. It really does point out a really significant challenge for counties and local governments when we are so heavily controlled by the state, and yet we are not funded for these things from the state. It requires that we use general fund, of which we are also limited to how much we can increase that. And I do worry at some point, what do we do when we fundamentally can no longer deliver the services that we are statutorily required to do with the revenue that we are able to either charge in fees or receive in property tax, which is limited by the state. And you know, I think every time we look to alternative revenue streams, we get tremendous pushback. So I do worry about that. I do worry about the expectation our community has that we be able to deliver these services effectively, efficiently, and timely, and yet we do not have. I worry that we continue to be on a path of diminishing resources to do so. So within that, I understand that this, you know, this fee increase, because it is not the overwhelming majority of the fees we charge, is not going to be leading us to cost recovery, nor was that necessarily the goal. But, you know, I look at this and I wonder, you know, with the very significant limitations on how to do cost recovery, you know, how is that going to impact this work from a perspective of, you know, number of staff, wait time, level of service, and to what degree should we begin to be concerned?
Thank you, Commissioner Moyer, for the question. We're currently using transportation funding or gas tax to fill the gap of what we're not able to cost recover. As you know, we've talked about with this board, that is also a declining resource of funding. And so really for us in the transportation department, there's constant trade-offs between operations and capital constructions, or you know, might mean that there's less potholes filled on Sauvies Island, unfortunately, in your district, because we're taking that gas tax money and filling the gap that we can't recover on the cost recovery side. So it's less staff and more, it cuts into our capital. Does that answer your question? I can't make eye contact with you, so I'm not sure I answered your question.
That's okay, yes, it does. You know, and I would just say as a comment, I do think that there is a time in which, and it is unfortunate, I have worked in the legislature when there were former county commissioners serving. I don't believe we have anyone currently, where I do actually think our legislature is woefully ignorant to the impacts of their policy decisions and the unbelievable strain it's putting on us. But, you know, I think about our fellow counties, particularly counties, frankly, with lower property tax base, and their ability to continue to subsidize what is really fundamental, basic government operations. And I think Oregonians think that just because we're a state with Democratic supermajorities, that we, our government is not really pretty profoundly underfunded. And, you know, and we can all have our beliefs about what tax fairness is, but I don't really think the state gets the degree to which they are making, you know, the very foundation of government, which is like fix my potholes and have a decent public education system, is crumbling. And some of that has to do with not understanding the role of local government, which is just me preaching to the choir. But I think it is worth noting that as we look toward the long session legislative agenda, I do think that we need to come together with our county partners around this continued limitation of revenue with ever increasing expectation, because it is not sustainable. And I don't think the legislature, frankly, well, I have feelings about the legislature as a whole and their lack of effectiveness and maybe knowledge, but particularly their lack of understanding of their role in working with local government.
Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate your comments and agree. So, all right, I want to just thank again you, Jessica, Margie, all of the transportation team for the work on the comprehensive review and strategic updates to our transportation fee system. Thank you, Commissioner Moyer, for your budget note. I think that was a big part of pushing this forward. I think this, as we're taking a look at the fees, especially in DCS, where we've got land use, we've got animal services, right? Like this is, you are a very public-facing department here at the county, and so it's really great to make sure that we are taking a look at these, understanding what the structure is, what the impacts are, and I will say personally, I'm really glad that we're digging into the waiver piece, because I know that had been an issue for folks in the past, and especially for staff who may have wanted to move towards a waiver system but just did not have the tools to do that. So just appreciate all of the work on this to better support our staff and help our community members navigate our systems. So thank you for that. We'll now have a roll call vote on the resolution.
Commissioner Moyer?
Aye.
Commissioner Singleton?
Yes.
Commissioner Brim Edwards?
Yes.
Vice Chair Jones-Dickson?
Yes.
Chair Vega Peterson?
Aye, the resolution is adopted. Thank you both so much. All right, now we have time for board comments on non-agenda items. I will call on commissioners to see who has any items to discuss today. Commissioner Brim Edwards, anything from you?
The only thing I want to flag, just in the sort of legislative waning days, an issue that I just want to raise, because even though the legislature is about ready to adjourn, they have a responsibility that has not been met, and that relates to the adequately funding public defenders for Multnomah County. And recently, the Roberts decision ruled that without public defenders, cases that were pending, if someone didn't have a public defender, a case needed to be dismissed within 90 days, and that has happened. And so about up to 600 cases have been dismissed, where actually local law enforcement had gone ahead and done their work. The district attorney's office has done their work, but because of lack of funding from the state, those cases are dismissed, which for, I think, all parties involved is really sort of a miscarriage of justice. So victims who, solely not because of the lack of the evidence or anything else, but because of lack of a public offender, their cases are being dismissed. And then for those individuals who had been charged, not having an opportunity for justice themselves as well, and to have constitutionally required legal defense. And about a week ago, I sent a letter to the governor in Ways and Means, and I know I've been talking to the chair about this as well, of really disrupting our justice system in a very fundamental way in Multnomah County. And again, this isn't a county responsibility to fund those public defenders, but it's the state's responsibility that they have not done. So I just want to continue to highlight this and to continue to put pressure on the state to adequately fund and support a public defense in Multnomah County, and to say that it's getting better across the state. this is the danger of citing averages. It may be getting better everywhere in the state, but not in our county. And again, the 600 cases that were dismissed, some of them may be reissued, but likely many of them will not. But those are just going to continue to grow. So this is an issue, again, for people to believe in the justice system in Multnomah County. It's going to be really important that we continue to ask the state to step up. So again, I appreciate the chair partnering with me on this particular issue, but I just want to highlight it as sort of an ongoing issue. It wasn't just a one-time example of cases being dismissed.
Thank you, Commissioner. And yes, we know that this is an issue that is affecting the system that we have here in Multnomah County every single day. So appreciate that. Commissioner Jones-Dickson, any comments?
No, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Moyer?
Yeah, I would just like to discuss briefly my sorry. This COVID has really been a wild ride. I would like to just briefly discuss an issue of which I have gotten a tremendous amount of email, of which I'm not sure the origin of the rumors, that I single-handedly was the opposition to Multnomah County being preempted in a bill related to the CEI hub. No, I was not. Multnomah County took a position against preemption, as most counties do, prior to session, of which we voted on our legislative agenda, which passed unanimously. I was asked, because of my work with Commissioner Singleton on our own CEI hub work, to testify on behalf of the county, of which I did. I did go down briefly. I laid out our position. I certainly took no pleasure in testifying against a bill. For colleagues that I like quite a bit. But the number of rumors that identified me personally as the issue, and somehow implied that I, as a member of the Multnomah County Commission and not a member of the Oregon Legislature, was somehow killing a bill, which, by the way, I believe got voted on the House floor today, is not accurate. I did go down and testify, and when I was in Salem that week, I was there to testify, and the following Friday, which was pre-scheduled, and had some pre-scheduled meetings. I did talk about the CEI hub. That was 3 weeks ago. I have had no conversations with any legislator since my trip to Salem. I did not personally in any way work this bill to ask people to vote no. Do I think, as a commissioner with a fiduciary responsibility to Multnomah County, that bill is good for Multnomah County? No, I don't. I think it leaves us profoundly vulnerable, but that's my opinion as an individual and as one of 5 commissioners. But I feel it is important, because I am aware, and I do know where some of the rumors originated from, that is not professional conduct to single somebody out using inaccurate or false information and blaming them for the success or not, and in this case it looks like it's going to be successful, of a piece of legislation of which they were not part of the work group that wrote it. They had represented the position of the entire county and is free to have their own opinion on the merits of a piece of legislation. But I am not a member of the Oregon Legislature. I do not vote on that initiative. They can, do what they want. I take preemption very seriously, as I am sure all local government electeds do, but I think it is important to call out when the actions of others are inaccurate or unfair. And so I do call that out. I care a lot about the CEI issue, as does this entire commission and has for years. I do want what's best for the residents of Multnomah County and certainly my district. Good people disagree on that, and that is totally fine. But I do think being accurate about the role people do or do not play in legislation, and also their right to have different perspectives, and that not be a character assassination, I bring up, just because I don't do that to other electeds, and I think good people can disagree on policy, but I also didn't play the role that I am being accused of. So I thought I would clarify for the record. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Moyer. Commissioner Singleton.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to share, it's now Women's History Month, so I just wanted to quote another great leader. When people ask me why I say the names and the count of immigrants that are taken every week, it's that I have something to say. I reflect on the words of Claudette Colvin. She said, when you've been abused daily and see people humiliated and harassed, you just get tired of it. She was a 15-year-old in Montgomery, Alabama, when she refused to give up her seat before Rosa Parks did, and just the bravery and moxie that she had in a segregated Deep South continue to inspire me today. This week, I wanted to highlight that the federal regime dropped a lawsuit against a number of law firms after a federal judge found that Trump's executive orders targeting them were unconstitutional. This happened because some of the firms stood up to the bullies while some acquiesced. And as Vanita Gupta said, this episode will be remembered as demonstrating the difference between institutions that had the ethical courage to uphold the Constitution and fight bullying and then won, and those that compromise their ethics and gain nothing. We must continue to stand up to these bullies. This is why I continue to push us in our sanctuary work and to stand firm in our values of diversity, equity, and inclusion. In 2025, at least 32 people died while in U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement custody, marking the highest number of annual deaths since 2004. This is the three-time increase from 2024. It is attributed to the 78% increase in the detained population by the end of the year. We have a broken system that is literally killing people. This week, while PIRC shared that there were 16 detentions in Multnomah County, leaders believe the decrease is because of ramped up attention in other places. This is the perfect time, if you have not yet, please go out and get Negro Watch training or Protect a Corner training, educate yourselves, find ways to prepare, and engage with your community so that when they decide to start targeting us again, you know what to do. On December 18th, the board unanimously supported the resolution that I brought forward with the chair to strengthen the sanctuary status. Part of that resolution that we discussed earlier were the two reports. I just want to encourage folks, if you're interested, those are available to the public. I encourage people to read them. This staff did some really good work to dig into what we can do to strengthen our policies to support our community members. And then I wanted to just highlight just briefly the proclamation day yesterday was just absolutely moving for so many different reasons, and I would leave it to others to talk about the ones that they sponsored, but I particularly wanted to highlight the Women's History Month proclamation that included the Women in Sustainability reception. The theme this year is Leading the Change, Women Shaping a Sustainable Future. And I was really honored to be able to moderate a panel discussion with some just amazing women, and the conversation was so inspiring and brought a lot of hope to a time that I think is still a real challenge for people. So I wanted to thank Jenny Lee, who's Deputy Director at Coalition of Communities of Color, Vivian Satterfield, the Chief Sustainability Officer for the City of Portland, Sylvia Tanner, our Senior Energy Policy and Legal Analyst in the Office of Sustainability, and Nikisha Nathan, who is Co-Executive Director for Neighbors of Clean Air. I also want to thank my team and from the Chair's office, Dennis from Central Comms, and John, the Director of our Office of Sustainability, for planning and doing the work for that proclamation and reception. I know I talked about how I can grow food, but for some reason I kill houseplants. I promise I will try to keep that house plant alive. And then lastly, I just wanted to thank Kenny Chen and Jun Zhu for their hard work and contributions. It was the first Lunar New Year proclamation, and so that was really powerful for people, and I just appreciated the work that they put into that. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Singleton, and I appreciate you walking through those two really great proclamations. We also recognize the contributions of procurement professionals here at Multnomah County, and Commissioner Brim Edwards brought forward the proclamation to raise awareness and support individuals affected by brain injuries, and so just really appreciate all of the folks who came to show up to support for those proclamations that we did, and appreciate all the work of staff to make sure that those were able to happen. I also want to note that on Tuesday was our county photographer Matoya's birthday, and I didn't get that message until unfortunately after our briefing on Tuesday, so I want to wish him a very belated birthday. He has been with us for almost 9 years. And he almost every week manages to conjure magic by making us look good in this lighting. So thank you, Matoya. And then just one more legislative update. Yesterday, the Oregon Senate passed legislation that advances efforts to renovate and modernize the Moda Center. And this is done as part of a multi-jurisdictional effort, including the City of Portland and, of course, Multnomah County. I want to say that we are, really deeply involved in this work with our partners at the state and the city to keep this economic engine running, ensure that the Blazers, the soon-to-debut Portland Fire, concerts, and cultural events all continue to be housed in the Rose Quarter right in Northeast Portland. So the plan for this board is I will be bringing a resolution in the upcoming weeks around the county's commitment to this effort. We're looking to coordinate our actions with the actions of Portland City Council, so more information on the coming timeline for this work will be ahead. We're working with them on that. I will say that this resolution is going to be our formal ability to talk about the conditions that will be attached to the dollars we are committing, and I know many in our community have reached out about those things, and so you're eager to hear more about that. So that will be our vehicle for being able to do some of that work as a preliminary to all the subsequent negotiations that would be happening. So I am looking forward to that discussion, and looking forward to the continued engagement on that. With that concludes today's regular board meeting. There being no further business, we are adjourned.